Hi, guys. Welcome to A Little Help for Our Friends, a podcast for people with loved ones struggling with mental health. Hey, little helpers. It's Dr. Kibby here. Before we dive into this episode, I wanted to tell you how I could help you navigate the mental health or addiction struggles of the people you love. Cool of Mine is the online coaching platform and community that I built to support you in the moment when you need it the most, like having hard conversations, asserting your needs, or setting boundaries. Even if you're just curious and want to chat about it, book a free call with me by going to the link in the show notes or going to coolamind.com, KULAMIND.com, and click Get Started. Thank you and enjoy the show. Welcome back, little helpers. Today we have an interesting and popular topic these days: the man-child syndrome, when men don't seem to grow up or don't want to grow up. I don't know why this is getting so popular recently. I have some theories, but I swear I see it all the time online, and it almost seems like there's an epidemic of men not growing up, being emotionally immature. Whether that's emotionally or developmentally, like they're not really hitting milestones that you would expect for, you know, 30s, for guys in their 30s or 40s. And it's really frustrating the partners as well as all the loved ones. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about what is this man-child syndrome? What does it look like? How do you spot the signs of it? Um, why, like the underlying psychology underneath the man-child syndrome, as I'm going to call it, um, and what different scientific psychological theories say about this and why it's happening, and also some tips about how does one stop being a man-child, or if you have a man-child in your life, how do you deal with that? So, sorry, let me think for a second. So, obviously, I'm interested in this topic from my own personal experience of actually dating a couple of man children. Um, I tend to, in the past, I used to be drawn to very boyish, fun, like really immature, silly, goofy guys. And I married and ended up marrying one, right? My last husband kind of felt like a child in many ways. And it's really not obvious at first what's going on. But then once I was like, wow, this really feels like this person isn't growing up, then I felt stuck. I really felt trapped by it. And the more I'm doing this work with Cool of Mind, where we're supporting and teaching skills to people with loved ones with mental illness, a lot of it, a lot of the people that are reaching out are like, hey, I have a boyfriend, a husband, a father who just is like a boy forever, right? It's just like a child forever. And the hard part is when all the responsibility, the adulting, gets pawned off to the people around this man child, like the wives, the partners, the moms, the siblings. And that's where really the problems happen. So I don't know. I still feel like there's an epidemic of this man children. And I'll say, before everyone gets upset, of course, men are not the only ones who can be immature. Women definitely can be immature, but I have a couple theories why it's more pronounced in men and it looks a little bit different in women. So today I will mostly talk about the man-child syndrome, but I'm happy to talk about the women-child syndrome, like immature women, in other episodes. But I feel like this has been just the hot topic of what do we do with men who won't grow up. So there are different words for it. I'm calling it man-child syndrome. It's just a thing that I'm gonna call it now. Called man babies, emotionally immature men, but it's also called the Peter Pan syndrome, right? Never want to grow up. Um, Another term I heard is puer eternus, which is Latin for an eternal boy. But this is also a form of narcissism, which I'll talk about too. Um, it was really interesting to, when I was in my internship at Cornell, I worked in the Personality Disorders Institute, and it was such a cool place. It's the head of it is Dr. Otto Kernberg, who was like the most famous psychiatrist in the world right now. He's like 93, 94. I don't even know, in his 90s, and he's still lecturing and teaching and supervising us. He's really incredible, and he really is the one of the world's expert in narcissism. And what really shocked me about working with him, working in this team, was that most of my patients with narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder were man children, right? When you think of narcissism, I would always think about the grandiosity, right? The CEOs, the center of attention, like the bigger, almost more like successful versions of narcissists. But I was shocked to see that there are so many narcissists who present as these man children. So when we talk about man-child syndrome, I can't help but think about narcissism now. So I'll talk through that too. But what does this look like? What does the man-child syndrome or the Peter Pan syndrome look like? It's what you imagine. It's a guy who is youthful and boyish, fun, charming. Often they're creative, they love to play, they're exciting. Um, Sometimes they're called like visionaries. I find that a lot of them are startup founders, right? Or like artists. Um, and they're really into ideas. And that's a core characteristic that I've seen. They're really into ideas, and the ideas of freedom, autonomy, being able to pursue what excites them. Sounds great, right? It doesn't sound anything wrong with that. We shouldn't pathologize that. That's amazing. And that is charismatic. It draws people in, right? It's magnetic when someone has that kind of youthful energy. But on that flip side, when someone has that, beautiful. But the flip side is when that becomes a trap, when the chase for freedom or excitement becomes their downfall. And what that looks like is whenever they hit a bump in the road, something that's hard, difficult, mundane, they don't like it. For the man children, they're like, this is wrong. They might say something like, wow, my job just got boring. This is not what really I'm passionate about. Or, my partner just wasn't the one. She's not the one. She just, doesn't light me up. But usually that happens after the honeymoon phase, when you first get into something or first get into something new. And then, just like the normal day-to-day realities just kind of set in. That's when you see them get bored or disenchanted. And then they think there's something wrong, and they seek to change, right? So they run away from the mundane. They run away from the everyday challenges that come up when you try to build something like a family or a career. And that's really the pathology part, that the avoidance of challenge is really a big part of the man-child syndrome, the Peter Pan syndrome. Oops, sorry. This new camera is awesome, but it like tracks me. So what this looked like in a couple people I knew. I mean, actually, what comes to mind is one of my recent business partners who we split up. But I'm always drawn to this personality, so it's really tricky. I have a lot of people in my life who fits into this category, men and women. But usually they're like, this business partner that I'm thinking about was like charged with ideas. When he came up, when we talked about when we brainstormed, came up with a new idea or came to a new solution, it lit him on fire. He was like, yes, we can do this. I could feel it. We're amazing. This is going to go so far. Like, we're going to, it just almost felt like I was on a rocket ship. You're on a rocket ship, blasting off before you blast off. And then when we start to execute that idea, then, oh, because it's taking too long, or someone said no, or um, it doesn't like it isn't as easily implemented. People aren't taking to it as quickly. There's some criticisms, right? There's like just normal stuff that comes up with just executing an idea. I could see him go, no, no, something isn't right. This isn't right. No, this is taking too. This is a bad sign. And even he's so smart that you can intellectualize. Oh, this is a sign that this idea isn't worth pursuing, and here are the principles why. We got to change to something new, and then we restart that cycle over and over again. And it started to feel like an allergy to reality. That's what man children have, this allergy to reality. I've seen this in my ex. He was just lost in ideas. It really is, they're really lost in these fantasies of the next thing is going to be the one, right? It's like that actor, the kind of like stereotypical actor who's like, oh, I'm just around the corner from my next big break, right? It's like this, I'm lost in these ideas. I have so many good ideas. And then I know that it's going to work out. I know something is going to be amazing, right? And with my ex, it was thinking about what job he wanted to do next. And he would open up all these job applications or, like programs or things and just be like, I could do this. Oh, that sounds amazing. I could do that. Oh, and just, oh yeah, I could start this business or that business, this project. And when he would talk about it, he would light up and this would be the next big thing. But then he would try to do it. It would just, you have to make a website. I don't know how to make a website. You have to contact people. You have to get capital and find, there's just like the normal steps. And he would get anxious and just would postpone that. And then he would just get lost in the other ideas, right? Like, okay, this isn't right. Let me think of the other ideas. And it's funny. I remember one of my family members who struggles with this. There was this one really, I would always see this, like always like flashy, always going to the flashy trips and, projects and, name drop famous people, like really into sparkle. And one really honest time, we were just talking and he said, I just know I have so much potential and I have so many good ideas and I get excited about something. But then as soon as I think about actually doing it, I don't know what happens. I just can't. And that's really what's going on inside these man children. It's this shiny object syndrome. But then when you actually have to do things to get the shiny object, then the thing doesn't look as shiny anymore. Something's wrong. It's classified as like, I can't do that. And so there's avoidance and going back into the fantasies. The other part about man children is that, especially the ones that don't get out of it, don't grow up, they blame the external world for their problems, right? So, and this goes really with any problems, patterns, just anything in psychology, where if you are blaming the rest of the world for your issues, it's really hard to grow. You're really relying on situation in the world around you to change things that you might not have control over, versus like taking accountability, saying, I need to change my behavior or thoughts or whatever, and I'm going to take on the responsibility of like growing and developing, making this better. So this also applies to the man child. They go, well, this idea would have been amazing had it not been for my business partner, right? Like the business partner I mentioned would always blame me and my other partner that we did something wrong, that it was actually our idea and it was a bad one. And he just like pawns it off on us, or that the situation isn't right, right? Or the romantic partner just doesn't get him, right? In general. So if you just, it just sounds like blaming the external world for why they can't live up to this potential. Another feature about these man children is often these are very exceptional people. very talented, gifted, smart, charming, handsome, funny, something that really makes them stand out. I find that particularly dangerous because what that ends up doing, and I'll talk about the psychology behind this, but what that ends up doing is that it cements their belief that they're destined for greater things, right? They're special, they are gifted, and they're above other people. And a lot of men who grow up gifted, not all, of course, again, not all, um, a lot of people who have like natural talents get really easy good feedback from it, right? Like people like them, from a young age, they're told that they're a genius, that they're special, and wow, they really get put on a stage. And a lot of them have grown up thinking that like I'm so smart or gifted or talented or creative and artistic. The world should come to me. Opportunity should come to me. I don't have to work for this or go through any hardship that normal people do, but I'm special. So it kind of puts them actually sometimes in a passive role, right? Like they don't have to work. They don't have to do it like internal work to get what they want. They're just given this gift. So I feel like man children always talk about like, oh, I have so much potential. I have so much unrealized potential. People don't really see how special I am. I'm really undervalued at my job. Um, my friends don't understand that I am just like gifted, right? There's just some kind of like um, I have a jewel inside me, and then the world just hasn't seen it. That's why I'm going through such hardship. As I'm talking about this, you can hear maybe the flavor of narcissism, right? One of the criterion for narcissistic personality disorder is being obsessed with fantasies that you'll have perfect romance, career, or future ahead of you, right? And being obsessive about that, but in a pathological way where it's not like a goal, it's not like manifesting, it's not like, oh, I, want to have this kind of career goal and I'm going to work towards it. It's like just obsessing over the fame and riches and love and admiration that you'll get one day when the world bestows upon you the recognition of your specialness that you deserve, right? So it's it's really a form of narcissism. And I thought it was so interesting when I was working with these patients with diagnosed narcissistic personality disorder. And it wasn't like they were like, what you imagine or what you see on social media of like narcissists, like taking everything and like building up a company and squashing all the little people. But it was actually like these young men who are handsome, charming, really insightful, um, smart, fun. Like, oh, sessions with them were so great because it just was like talking, and you just like get lost in the conversation. But they were living on their partner's finances, right? They didn't have a job of their own. They were unemployed permanently, or they were like going to school, but their partner was paying for it. But they usually had like a sugar daddy or sugar mommy, someone who was supporting them, right? So they were just, some of them were like sleeping in guest rooms or on the couch of some people, but they were dependent on someone else, even though they were like, wow, you look at them, you're like, what, you should be snatched up in any job. What's going on here? And they usually actually came into therapy at first because of depression, like, and self-esteem issues. They're like, why? I know that I'm special. I know that I have talent or potential. Why am I sleeping on my ex-boyfriend's couch? Why can't I open, and build a company that I know that I've always dreamed of? Um, and so it looks pretty sad. It looks very sympathetic, right? So that's the hard part with my ex and all these patients. It was just like, gosh, like I don't see anything wrong with this. Like you seem great and you seem like you're going through a hard time, but you'll back on your feet, right? And that is the trap also of the loved ones of the man children is like if I just support them and help them and make them comfortable, give them what they need, give them the landing pad, pay for their bills, their potential will catch up. Like they'll get back on their feet. And when that doesn't seem to happen, there's always excuses, right? There's always like, oh, but that job wasn't right, or they didn't really like it didn't have the right benefits, or there's always like logical reasons why they didn't launch. But really, these man children look like failures to launch. The so start to think about these man children as like covert or vulnerable narcissists, right? They're at the point where they're not killing it. And they are vulnerable. They feel bad about themselves. They're like not realizing their potential. They're depressed. That's when they usually come into therapy. And once the therapist works on like, if, worked on like just their mood and stabilizing their mood, then you start to see, oh, wow, like they're not feeling good about themselves because they haven't built anything of their own. They haven't had a stable partnership. They want kids and don't have it. They don't really have a career. They're not like moving forward in life. And then any steps to talk about like, oh yeah, like I want to do this job, that job, and we try to get them to apply for something, and then something gets in the way. It seems like something always gets in the way of that next step. It's not their fault. They tried, but something just blocked them from their potential. That's when, and you see that over and over and over, you go, oh, wait, it's not just life is hard, right? Adulting is hard, totally. But that they're making maybe unconscious choices that is leading for them to stay stuck, to stay in like Never Never Land, Peter Pan's. And what that looks like underneath, what it looks like inside them is it's like they're pulled, right? They want to feel free. They want to feel fun. They want to feel excitement, right? They want to feel youthful. They want to play. But they also know that they should do these other things. They know they should grow up. But then they're like, no, 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 no. If I grow up, it's going to feel like a trap. It's going to feel like I'm weighed down. And it's this unconscious or conscious resistance to limitation. It's this avoidance of feeling like there's a barrier, that there are limits to how free we can be if we really want to commit to something, right? Like the realities of life just feel so unbearable, right? Like if you choose this path, if you go with this idea, this partner, this job, you're cutting out all the other ones. You're not going to be able to do the other things. I remember with my ex, there was like a period of time when we were exploring the different options for jobs, and he was like depressed for a couple of days because he couldn't pursue a music career. And I remember like validating it, but also being like, but that's not any like that's something you'd like to do, but you've never pursued that. You never like worked on that as a career. So like why would that like like couldn't get out of bed for days and days because he was like, I'm never going to be a professional musician. I'm like, but you're a doctor. Like, so there was but now I understand it as like, that really felt like a loss of that freedom, that excitement, that I, I have to narrow down my choices and I have to sacrifice. I had to let go of certain things, right? That feels like anti-freedom. And giving up freedom feels unbearable. So they keep darting around. They keep going from exciting, like shiny object, shiny object, shiny object, and just never deepening, right? They never build a career. They never are able to like build a family, or they build a family, but then they run away from the parenting role, or they get all depressed because, frankly, having a child is hard, right? It's like it's not fun. It's a lot of the time it's just drudgery. Um, and the man children just doesn't want anything to do with it, right? They're just like, oh, feel like the old ball and chain, right? They feel like life, and the realities of life are balls and chains. So, I mean, I'd like to first think about what forces like are enabling this. What forces are enabling this man-child Peter Pan syndrome? Just to validate it. I mean, my goodness, doesn't that sound awesome? Just to play and be free, and avoid responsibility or hard work, and get everything you want. It sounds great, right? What that actually is just being a child forever, right? That's what children get to do. They get to play, explore, they get to tantrum, they get to make mistakes. And I'm gonna be there every step of the way. I'm gonna let my son can throw a tantrum, and I'll still love him. I'll never leave him. But if a man, like if my husband throws a tantrum, like in a really terrible way, that's what my son does, like, yeah, I would consider leaving him, right? So it's this unconditional support and freedom when you're a child. And my goodness, like, that makes total sense. Who wouldn't want to be a child forever? Who wouldn't want to just let the id out, like their deepest primal desires, and then have everyone around them just support that, right? That's a sign of like power. That's a sign of, and I'm learning at school. Remember when we learned how like these kings and Roman emperors lived? Like they would just have everything. They would have feasts. They would have, you know, lovers. They'd have everything. Just, like they'd be coddled, right? And then the world around them just makes it happen. Their deepest desires, and they could just be free. It makes sense why people want that, and especially what's especially hard in this day and age is that America and consumerism really enables people not growing up, being a man child, for various reasons. One, America is a young country compared to all the countries out there, right? Like it's a very young country, and there's a lot of value of in youth, right? We don't value old age and wisdom. We don't value our elderly. It's terrible, right? Like in other countries, when you're older, like watching my grandparents get old in Hong Kong, wow, we all treated my grandparents like kings. We would come to their house, we would visit them, we would pay their respects, we'd listen to them, we would be quite, it really was like they are the authority figures. They have the wisdom. We listen to the elders. Um, you could even see it on the street that we would walk into a room and people would pay attention to the elders, right? Help them, bow to them, smile, right? Here in America, that's not the case. It's the young who gets idealized, put on the pedestal, seen, right? This is why we're so desperate to like stay young and and because like there's power in youth here. Um, and so we are drawn to these man children. We're drawn to things that feel kind of immature because they're fun. They feel alive, right? And uh, another part of that is consumerism. And I think I'm mostly thinking about marketing and social media and things like that. They are going to prey on dopamine. They're going to prey on, they're going to sell to you through easy hits of dopamine, right? So instead of working hard for something, being patient, suffering, they're like, oh, here you go. Easy outcome. You don't have to work hard, no effort, right? Think about it. Amazon, click of a button, you have everything you want at your doorstep. TikTok, Instagram, you're scrolling through video after video of videos of people saying, in 60 seconds, I'll tell you the one mindset shift that will change your life. I'm guilty of saying this too. I mean, I'm trying to play the game, but like knowing how the sausage is made, I'm like, oh my God, we're just selling like quick, easy, free power and results, right? You don't have to work hard. You just have to get this makeup. You don't have to you don't have to suffer through figuring something out given to you, right? So what sells is something that makes success seem easy and quick and accessible, right? Attainable. The amount of reels I see online that are like, "Hi, here's how I'm a 24-year-old girl who made millions in just a month online." It's like, wow, how much does that glorify youth and the man-child syndrome, where it's like, I don't have to work that hard. I don't have to develop wisdom and experience or suffer through anything. Success is easy. It's in my fingertips. I just need to be me. I just need to be fun and attractive and young and attention grabbing, and riches can be mine right away, right? So there's all these messages in American society that's like, youth is great and being adventurous and almost self-absorbed, narcissistic is good. I just watched Marty Supreme. I love Timothée Chalamet. I love these movies, and I thought it was a great movie. But it just reminded me again of how our culture just like loves this kind of character, the character that's a maverick in some way, has a special talent that allows him to just bulldoze through life, right? Avoid normal responsibilities, break the mold, disrupt, and be successful. The movie is a little bit more balanced than that, but this character, Marty Supreme, is just, he's so good at ping pong, and also he's just like kind of a narcissist. So he just gets through life from this energy and this go-gettedness and this brazen confidence, right? Like, idea, ooh, that thing, oh yes, I want that, right? He's just charging through life with his talent and his confidence. He's very boyish too. I mean, so to speak. They're like, Timothée Chalamet looks like a child still, right? Even though they made him look a little older, there's something boyish about him, which makes it a little impish, right? So and if you look on a lot of our media, that maverick, that like, I'm a narcissist, I could do whatever I want because I'm special and talented, I don't have to follow the rules, it's really praised. It's really valued in our society, right? We are fascinated by it. We elect people based on that. We put people in positions of power. We would look up to people who are kind of like this, I'm going to get, right? There's a little bit less value in, I just worked really hard and did the boring stuff and sat on my computer and did the spreadsheets. And even when days are, dull and aching, like I stuck through it, right? That's less flashy. It's less sellable. So you have all these social values in not growing up youth. But then you also, right now, I think what's really hard is the economy. So what sticks in my mind is this book I read a while ago. It's called Of Boys and Men, Why the Modern Male is Struggling, Why It Matters, and What to Do About It by Richard Reeves. It's a really good book, and it really highlights, like, it's really ironic because I had to actually pause doing this, talking to you and doing this podcast, because my 3-year-old son was throwing a tantrum. And it's just it's so interesting to actually to have so much experience dating man children and then having a child of my own, like having a son. And I'm always terrified, like, oh God, I don't want them to grow up like that. Like, I don't want them to be a man child forever. I remember saying that to my therapist, and my therapist said, the thing with children is most of the time they grow up. So it's interesting that, it's developmentally all the things that I was just talking about, like play, being lost in ideas, like being fun, wanting things their way. That's developmentally appropriate for a 3-year-old. But then when you have a man who's like 40 years old and still acting like that, it's like, that's just not appropriate, right? They become narcissists. It's funny how much we demonize narcissists, like think of them as bad people, think of them as they want to hurt you, they're trying to take advantage of you and yes, agreed. There are a lot of people like that who are just out to hurt you. But a lot of the narcissists that at least I've seen, assessed, and worked with, they are hurtful because of all of these man-child syndrome mechanisms I'm talking about. Wanting to run away from pain, wanting to run away from sacrifice or difficulty, the realities of life, right? And in order to do that, what happens is that they will dump the problems on the people around them, right? They leave partners and say, I don't want to deal with this. Commitment is too hard. Or they leave jobs. They don't do the hard work, right? They leave the boring task to someone else, or they make someone else fund the dream, right? So they go like the patients, and my ex was like, well, I'm going to be amazing at some point. You can support me until I get there. All right. So really they're putting the adulting on other people. And that's really what the selfish and exploitative part looks like. And it's not always malicious. It becomes malicious when they know it hurts the someone else, right? Like my patients, their partners or whoever was supporting them are like really angry. They're like, I can't afford this. You need to pay rent. You need to get a job. And they know, and my patients would know that that would be hard for their loved ones, but they do it anyway. They make choices to not get a job, right? That's the more malicious part, where they're exploiting other people in order to make the fantasy stay alive. So to go back to the Of Boys and Men book I was talking about, the book was saying that men are struggling right now in unemployment and academic success and just all metrics of success. Men are behind women in this country, at least. And they're really having a hard time with it. Their self-esteem is low. They feel lost, right? Women are taking on all these different roles. They're working, but they're also studying, working hard, and having kids. And men aren't, and they're just falling behind, and they're getting more depressed and angry. They're like, wait, the future that was promised to me is not mine. And I guess a lot of people like me will say like, boo-hoo, right? Like women are just, like harder workers and, getting ahead. But I I recognize that it's really hard for men to grow up thinking that, especially the ones that are gifted, that they career will be a manifestation of their specialness, right? Like they'll have this amazing career, they'll be a CEO, they'll lead, they're a visionary, they're going to be a billionaire, unicorn, startup founder. Um, and that's the only thing that they identify with. Women identify with a lot of different things, but men are like, oh, I am my career. I am how much money I earn. And the economy is just not set up for it these days. It's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of layoffs, right? So the main source of this, like realizing the specialness, is dwindling. So not only does our society just value youth and, specialness, but it's not giving the rewards of slow building and being patient and hard work, right? So if these man children are like, okay, well, I'm going to accept difficulty, I'm going to accept hard work, and I'm going to earn my way up to the top. In previous generations, that was possible. People can stay in a job for a few years and afford a house. Now it's like, do I, get coffee and make copies and do boring work for many, many years, work my way up to the top and not really afford a home, not really feel the fruits of my labor, right? The kind of the long-term benefits is not really there. or go on TikTok and be told by a bunch of 24-year-olds how they got millions of dollars overnight. So it's really, the world is really set up to keep these boys in Never Never Land in their Peter Pan syndrome. The puer eternus. I love that. Forever. The eternal boy. And at the core of this man-child syndrome, this like avoidance of building and hard work, is distress intolerance, an intolerance for discomfort, right? Life is challenging. Life, if you really want to build anything meaningful, it's going to be boring and shitty for a lot of the time, right? There's like every job, in order to build a career, every job has its downsides. Whether, sitting, I mean, even after this, like, it's exciting to talk to you all, but there's a lot of, like we have to edit and then we have to like upload, like there's all these like mundane things about any job or anything that's worthwhile, right? Even in romance, we have so many movies, showing the meet cutes and the infatuation phase, but then it always slips into this, everyday life, and it could be boring, right? Like most of a long-term relationship is like logistics and like, farting in front of each other and figuring out who's going to buy the groceries. I mean, that is not as sparkly, but that is what it takes to build something meaningful and lasting, right? Having a legacy, building something like that, building something like respectable and deep, you have to earn it. And that's part of the narcissism of like, these man children have the core belief that they don't need to do that is wrong. Going through the mundane realities of life is something that they are above, right? Everyone else has to work hard and do the boring stuff, but I don't have to do that. I'm so smart. I don't have to study as hard as other people. I should just get the A. I should just get the job. I should just get the promotion, right? So it's this idea that you're so special that you get to skirt and jump over the normal rules of earning something, right? That's entitlement, right? I don't have to deal with the hardship of a partner and like when they're going through a hard time and when I have to sacrifice my time in order to support them, right? It should just feel fun all the time. And so once they get to that point of kind of the boring parts of life, it feels uncomfortable, as it does for everyone, but they read it as, this is wrong, I shouldn't have to do this. Whereas for many other people, they think, no, this is just part of, building a career. Just have to do boring grunt work for a really long time. I have to get coffee for everyone. I have to intern. I have to work my way up to the top. It's just part of it. They go, no. This is wrong. This is the wrong path. I'm going to try something else. So it's really this intolerance of discomfort, and like maybe intolerance of the feeling of sacrifice or loss or boredom. Because they see that as a sign that something's wrong instead of like a necessary evil, a necessary step to get things that you really care about. So how does someone get here, right? How does someone become a man-child? That was something that was so interesting to me. As I was treating these narcissistic patients, I also was in a marriage with someone like this, with man-child. He would say himself that he has Peter Pan syndrome, so not like going off base here. And so I was doing this, I was working with these people professionally, and then I was also married to that. And I was like, how does someone get here? I almost felt like it was a little unjust because, not a little, a lot unjust, because it was like, wait, I want to chill. Like, I want to just sit in ideas and have other people do it. Like, why you? Why do you get to do that and think that you can do that? And someone like me would have to pick up the slack. And so learning about this as a psychologist was really interesting, really cool to me. And there's a couple of different theories that could help us explain what's going on. Um, I think the first one that really helped, I mean, and these are all going to sound so obvious, so it's, it was just enlightening for me. So I'll share what I discovered. But Jung's schema therapy gave a really good um, framework for what happens when someone's needs aren't met in childhood. So we have different needs in childhood, and if there is a deficit or absence in meeting that need, then in Jung's schema therapy, they say that you develop a schema, a maladaptive schema, like this belief about life or yourself and the world, and it doesn't really work. It's not that healthy, and you compensate for it, and you adapt to it in ways that are getting in the way of your life. And I love that it had that in schema therapy they talk about the problem with impaired limits. So it's so interesting. It's not something that we talk about enough, but a really important thing that children need growing up is limits and boundaries. Having someone say no to us, telling us what is okay and what's not okay, telling us that if we want something, we're going to have to sacrifice in order to get it, right? There's that part of childhood where a parent should say no, right? And tell them the realities of the life. Like, you can't always get what you want. It's so funny because I just dealt with this just now. My son is 3 years old. I had the door locked so I could do this. He's screaming at the door, and I was like, I'm busy. I gotta work. And he's screaming, no, like he just was not okay with this being a limitation. He wanted mommy. He wanted to come in. He wanted full freedom and access, but he got a no. I did the wrong thing. I really regret it by, you know, pausing this, taking a break from this, opening the door and being like, sorry, buddy. And then he just like, you know, stormed in and threw a tantrum. Threw a tantrum when he got the no. That is probably like a move to impair his sense of limits, right? Like if he screams hard enough, he could get mommy. So that was my mistake. But in schema therapy, they're saying that there's a lot of problems that happen when someone grows up with impaired limits, and that could look like different things. That could look like parents who are overly permissive, right? Give, never say no. My favorite example of this is I've always loved this in Willy Wonka, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Veruca's salt, right? That if anyone remembers that movie or book, it's that spoiled girl who's like, I want this, daddy. I want that. Like the one whose dad like owns like a factory. She's like a rich girl and she's so spoiled because you see the dad just going, whatever you want, sweetheart, whatever you want. You want this, you want that, I'll pay for it, I'll make it happen, right? That's impaired limits. That's actually not giving what that girl needs and saying no sometimes and saying you can't have everything you want. You're going to have to do things in order to get what you want from life. You're going to have to go through some pain, sacrifice. You're going to have to do things you don't want to do in order to get things that you want. So that's impaired limits. And what comes from that in schema therapy, what comes from impaired limits is grandiosity, entitlement, kind of like a warped sense of autonomy and being able to achieve things, right? Because, yeah, I could, tantrum and get what I want, but then eventually that's not going to work when you're an adult, right? It's going to work sadly when you're a 3-year-old. But if my son did that as a 40-year-old at his work, like stormed into someone's office and just threw a tantrum, he's not going to have that job anymore. Right? So I didn't do a good enough job to teach him that, like, no, you can't do that. If someone's busy and has a door locked, you can't just bust in and tantrum about it. So basically, this impaired limits could come from permissive, overly permissive parents, and it also could come from neglectful parents. So ones that, just didn't pay much attention. The kid gets into trouble or does what they want, mostly because the parents just aren't there. So there's the overly giving helicopter parents, but there's also the absent parents who just doesn't teach them, hey, you can't do this, or this is right, this is wrong. Like you gotta, here's a limit here, and here's how you learn how to navigate that limit, right? Teach them patience and um, delayed gratification. Right. So that's Jung's schema therapy. It's like they're just spoiled as a kid, right? So they become man children. When I studied with Dr. Kernberg at the Personality Disorder Institute, the fascinating thing that I learned was that it was a form of narcissism, which I didn't know. They gave me these patients. I was like, I don't understand why they're in the Personality Disorder Institute. They're just lovely. They're lovely young men who just are having a hard time and just like sleeping on their boyfriend's couch. I don't see the problem. And they were like, no, this is a form of narcissistic personality disorder. Someone who is so who is so allergic to the realities of life because they think they're special, they come with expectations, they think, they don't like being ordinary, that they can't even function in the world. They're not always the kings of the castle. They're the ones who are like, I should be king, but life dealt me a bad hand, and here I am depressed on someone's couch, not fulfilling my dreams. So just helping me see that this is a form of narcissistic personality disorder. It's more vulnerable or covert narcissism because it's not obvious, but also this is sometimes when you see someone who's like chronically depressed, sometimes a psychologist will be like, I wonder if there's like a personality thing going on because they keep getting to themselves in positions that make them unhappy. So something that they're doing over and over again. And Dr. Kernberg also helped me to see the aggression in this, the badness of it. Which I really was resistant to at first. I just when I see these man children, including my husband, my default is to feel bad, is to feel like I want to take care of them. I feel sympathetic, right? They're the weaker ones. They're the victims, right? And like I have to help them, or it's my fault, right? There's there's just a sympathy and guilt feeling when I'm around these man children, and Dr. Kernberg and the team were like, no, this is aggressive. This is like they are aware that they are imposing on their loved ones, that their loved ones are financially strapped, they're unhappy, they want to be cared for themselves. And these guys are just staying, immature so they don't have to deal with that. But in order to stay immature and like these victims, they're putting their loved ones through pain and suffering. That's aggressive. That's mean. And actually that was the thing that like turned on the light bulb for me of like, oh my God, I felt like the mean one, the harsh one in our relationship. And I felt so bad for my ex-husband. But I also felt so angry, and it was just a very confusing thing. Like I was like, I have all the emotional labor, I'm paying all the bills, I'm doing all the things, and he's like struggling with his identity and feeling lost. And I felt like I was the imposer, the one with power, who's like, pressuring him. And when I said before about how they tend to blame the outer world, that really fit my response to it, right? It's my fault. They my ex-husband was like, if you know Kibby is the one who is putting too much pressure on me, and is too hard on me, I'm never good enough, right? So it's like all my fault. And he would cite his depression as creating his dysfunction. It's kind of nice to actually like separate from that and be like, oh my God, and see from different examples that it wasn't just me. It wasn't just me. But That's beside the point. But the thing is that um, that form of vulnerable narcissism is still aggressive towards other people. It still it exploits other people, right? It makes other people have to do the hard work, the emotional labor to take up the um, to overfunction, right? Oh, like a really good example is my ex used to have this phrase that drove me nuts. He kept saying, "Let it eat." Right? He was like, "Oh, if you if you want to indulge in something, if you want, you know, to to eat something good or to enjoy something, just like let it eat." Just like, and he would talk about this metaphor of just buying all these like baked goods and just let it eat, just go ahead and eat it. And I remember when I would hear him give that advice to people, I remember thinking, and he was saying, like, "Oh, I feel so much better now that I'm able to like indulge in my wildest fantasies and really take care of myself." And I remember thinking, but I'm the one paying for that. I'm the one paying all the bills. I'm the one actually buying the food, literally. So there, what I didn't recognize is the aggression in that. It seems so wonderful. It seems so it's magnetic when someone is that youthful because, gosh, doesn't everyone want to feel that way? Doesn't everyone want to gravitate to this eternal youth kind of feeling where someone says, "Let it eat. Yes, let's just be hedonists and lie around and do whatever we want." But then, like that sounds great, but then I'm the one taking on the pain of it, the boring stuff. And that is selfish. That's aggressive to those people. So Dr. Kernberg was really helped us see the malignant narcissism in there, how mean it kind of is, even if it doesn't look like that, right? It's like taking advantage of someone, even though it's fun, but it's taking advantage. And it's so funny. I remember I was seeing these patients and had supervision with Dr. Kernberg, which means that a bunch of us trainees, a bunch of us therapists were in a meeting with him, and he would talk to us about one of our clients and one of our patients, and then he would just give advice or what he thinks that we should do. And it was so cool because he's so famous and whatever. And I was so scared. I was like talking to him about my patients. And then he was just like, "Oh, okay. So the problem is that he's a lazy bum." I was like, "Oh no, he's not a lazy bum. He's just like, he's really smart. He's working at, like at school, but he just is like down on his luck. He lost his job." So he was like, "Yeah, he's a lazy bum." I was like, this famous doctor is saying this. And that felt really harsh too, but he was like, "Of course people want to stay a baby. Of course. Of course you would want to give in to your every whim and just get instant gratification and have someone else take care of you. Everyone wants that. But we don't get that. That's just not reality. And he wants to stay a baby. And he's being lazy." And I think he said that intentionally because I was so sympathetic, so like pulled into the narcissism, like, "Oh, his poor thing, he's a victim of life and circumstance." And Dr. Kernberg was intentionally being like, "No, he's doing something bad." Okay? So that kind of so there is a form of narcissism and they're just being lazy bums. Um and so those perspectives kind of, I swirled around in my mind, and I really love this quote from Carl Jung, one of the famous psychologists. "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And what he means by that is, we can't be. It's great. Everyone, of course, wants to be a baby and wants to be taken care of and doesn't want um, to go through the boring stuff and the mundane stuff of life. But there is no building a meaningful life without some kind of discomfort, without some kind of pain. And I do think that's why women are Probably, it's like I've met emotionally immature women, of course, but women are less plagued by this man-child syndrome because, I mean, I think we were born being told that life is going to be painful, like literally, like we have a period every month, and like for a lot of us, like the value of womanhood is giving birth, and that look like we just know that it's going to be the most pain ever. Right? We're born with this idea if you want something in your life that you're going to have to work for it, you're going to have to sacrifice. It's going to be painful. But in some households, in some families, in some cultures, men are not told that. Like, you could do anything you want. You're so special. You're amazing. You're perfect. And then they become entitled and they become man children. So I think those are the main psychological theories that underlying what makes a man child. One is the impaired limits. They're not taught from an early age that they can't have everything they want, essentially. Um, it's a form of narcissistic personality disorder where there's actually, they believe they're so special that they take advantage and hurt other people because of it. And they feel like they don't have to do the hard thing that other people have to do in order to get what they want. And also distress intolerance, right? In general, that's just like understanding discomfort of life as something wrong, something bad. And actually, there's another. I don't know this theory as well, but I also read that Carl Jung was saying that there's different archetypes, right? We have like different kind of in our unconscious self. We have all these archetypes, like the mother figure, and then there's a father figure in our archetypes in our psyche. And that father figure is a symbol of structure and discipline and hard work and leadership through um, uh, yeah, being grown up, essentially, like working hard and sacrifice, right? And it doesn't necessarily correlate with like, did they have a good father figure? But it just that these man children don't develop that father figure inside, that feeling of pride of like, I worked hard and I got to where I am because of patience and discipline and hard work, right? So that part is underdeveloped. So what are we going to do about this men children men children, like what what do psychologists do, like how can we fix this? It's really difficult. I mean, I you know I think one thing is to recognize what's happening and recognize you can recognize both um validating what, like let's say you have a man child in your life, married to one, you have one in your family. Your son's one, you're like, oh my gosh, I thought this kid would get out of my house, and he's just like hanging hanging out here. I'm paying for the bills, but like, do I ask him for rent? Like, what do I do? Um, One is just to recognize and validate that what's going on inside, right? That internally and externally, they've gotten messages that um, what's right is being youthful and creative and free and all the things that we talked about, right? The um, going for what you want without any kind of being unfettered, like no limitations, no boundaries. Um, so believing that that's what's right and good, and then being extremely distressed when they come across like the realities of life, like how boring it is when you go from the honeymoon phase of a relationship to just like the boring realities of everyday long-term partnership, or how every job has a downside, right? So just validating that, like, yeah, they don't have the capability to delay that gratification, to like plow through and overcome those discomforts that other people can. They don't have any value in mastery, or they don't feel mastery. And when I say mastery, I mean like that positive feeling of pride and accomplishment that you have when you go through something hard, right? So validating that like that sucks, and that's actually like that's a skill deficit. That's like that sucks for them. And but also to recognize that this, if they keep making decisions based on that, they keep blaming the world for their problems, they keep avoiding responsibility and hardship, then it's putting a lot of work on you, right? It's like pawning off that adulting on you. So just recognizing that and being like, okay. The hard part of noticing all that is, at least for me, I was like, if I don't keep coddling them, taking care of them, they're going to leave me. They're not going to like it. So that's when I tend to overfunction. That's when I overcompensate. When I feel like I'm with someone who's emotionally immature, I tend to give, 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 and take care of them and pay for things and give them presents and console them. And if they, get a criticism, I reassure them, I tell them they're great. Like, I totally enable this kind of immaturity, because the thing that I feel is, if I don't do that, they're going to hate me. They're not going to like it. They're going to leave me. So it was my mistake to overfunction and overgive and coddle, um, just to keep them. And I was kind of right. Like, the more I have a couple friends like that. I used to, and like my business partner, my ex, the more I do the hard work for them, the more they liked me, the more they want to stick around me. And when I said, no, I don't want to do that, or you do that, then they would get pouty and upset, like, oh, but you know how hard this is for me, and this is easy for you, right? So I think that it is the wrong thing to do to think that if I just keep supporting them, um, coddling them in the way, enabling them, then if I keep doing that, eventually they'll launch. Eventually they'll take initiative, they'll grow, and then they'll, be so grateful I was there through the hard time. If you're dealing with a man child, that doesn't happen. It just lets them continue being babies. And so this word has popped up recently, man keeping. So, like, instead of man keeping, which is like coddling them and keeping these man children, step back. Don't overfunction, step back. Let them rise to the challenge. And it's going to be hard because you're going to watch them suffer. Oh, God, it's so hard to apply for a job and interview. I get so anxious. I can't do it. And you're going to feel like so pulled to want to help them, right? Of course, you love this person who's man child, and you want to take away their distress. Maybe it's easy for you. Maybe applications or the boring parts of life are easy for you, right? So you just do it for them. But that is doing them a disservice. That's not teaching them that they can have competency and mastery and do things that are hard and get a reward from it. You're robbing them of that experience. So just remember that and take a step back. I took a real step back with a divorce, but if you're in that kind of, if this is like your loved one, let them rise. Let them do the hard work. Let them see the fruits of their own labor. It might be messy at first. They might stumble, but don't rescue. Don't swoop in and compensate and save them from failure or falling. Let them fall, because they can learn from it. And if they don't, well, then it's up to you to choose if you want to keep propping it up over and over and over again for eternity. That is your choice. No shame in that game. It's okay. But don't think that you're rescuing is going to lead them to stand on their own 2 feet. That's where codependency comes in. Anyway, that's a different topic. I'll do another episode on codependency. I love one of the forces of good that could really combat this man-child epidemic is someone like Alex Hormozy. Alex, it's so weird. Alex Hormozy has like a big following of men, and he is a like fitness bro, successful entrepreneur who did all these fitness businesses, and then now does like business coaching. And check out his content. He does a lot of Instagram and YouTube, and I like him because he just breaks down business concepts in really simple terms. But his content is just a lot of promoting, I think, maybe like the archetype of the father figure, but it's just like, hey, he says, like, work is boring. And the people who are successful just put up with the boring parts for longer. You just to be consistent, because most people aren't consistent. They run when things get boring. And if you are able to stick with that and just keep going, that's where good things happen. I just love that message, because what he puts forth is you can build good things and like look at these amazing things you can get from hard work. And it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of consistency. It's not going to be fun all the time. It's not shiny object syndrome, but this is what that looks like. So I love that his messages have, they have to do with business, but I hope that it's putting out the message that like to these young boys of like, just grow up and work hard. And it's not going to be pleasant all the time, but that's what the good parts of life come. Dr. Kernberg said that, oh my God, it was just his intervention that he taught me for these man children was so brutal. I almost couldn't do it. I really chickened out. But he said, okay, in order to treat these man babies, he still would call them lazy bum. He was like, to treat these lazy bum, you have to say to them, you cannot be a baby. You want to be a baby. You want to be cared for. You don't want to have any consequence or responsibility. And that, of course, makes sense. But you can't have that. You're an adult. That's not available to you. You had that when you were a kid, and now you can't have that anymore. So you can't be a baby. I mean, a lot of my supervision was like, I couldn't say it that bluntly. Like, it was just so scary to like, it sounded so mean, and that's not really my therapist style. But I took that advice to heart. I was like, I gotta be upfront. I can't just like keep enabling this fantasy world that they can be a child forever, right? There's consequences. And so I had to confront and be like, I totally understand why you would, want to stay at your boyfriend's house, and whenever, job applications get hard, you just want to like sit on the couch and smoke weed and watch TV. Like that, of course, I get that. Like, however, all the things that you want in life are going to take some sacrifice. It's going to take pushing through that point of pain, doing that job application. It's not fun, but you're not a baby anymore. You're a grown man, right? Don't you want to see your specialness and talents be valued? Don't you want to fulfill your potential? It's going to be unpleasant. So just being super blunt there was one intervention that I learned as a psychologist. But from a psychologist perspective, but also, from a partner's perspective, there's a technique called limited reparenting. And what that means is that there is some like with psychologists, there's some reparenting, there's some giving that missing that need that wasn't met in childhood through the therapy relationship with limits, right? So whenever we work with someone who has a personality disorder, or has impaired entitlement or impaired limits, right? They don't deal with boundaries or rules very well. Our therapy has to be really boundaried, really clear. And the takeaway from that for people, not just therapists, is if you're dealing with someone who's a man child and just can't really handle like normal boundaries and rules, I mean, you have to be really boundaried and really clear about the boundaries, right? Like, don't be fluffy, and don't be like, you can't be like, hey, I just really need you to take more initiative, right? But instead, make it really clear and say, you, if you don't contribute X amount of dollars to the household, then you have to leave after 2 months, or I expect you to get a job in order to pay this, and this is what you get. If not, here's the consequence, right? Like very clear, like if you do this, then that. But if you don't do this, then I'm not going to do that, right? So like very clear rules and structure, right? What this looks like in therapy is we would often have a contracting process in the beginning of treatment with these kind of patients. What that looks like is um, the first couple sessions is really laying down the rules in very clear terms. Like, if you miss 3 sessions in a row without advance notice, we're no longer able to work together. Or if you're late more than 15 minutes, you're going to have to pay for the whole session. We won't be able to have it. Right. So just like very clear, and you have to write it down. And you have to reiterate it, and you have to be really clear in the beginning, because they're going to break it. Right. They're going to be like, well, like, I was late, but like, I've had such hard thing. Like, oh, someone cut me off in traffic, and I mean, I'm here and dedicated to this. So can't you make an exception? Can you make an exception is sometimes like a tell for either man, children, or narcissistic. Like, can't you break the rules for me? Like, can't the rules not apply to me? But when you set very clear boundaries and rules in the beginning of your relationship or at some point, then it's easier to call back to them later, right? It's harder when you're in the moment and you're kind of grappling over like a boundary being crossed in the moment. It's easier to set the boundaries in the beginning and then call back to it. It's like, no, I know, I understand. The traffic is terrible. However, our rules are, if you miss 15 minutes, I have to charge you and we can't have a session. Right? So for you, just being very, very clear and not waffling, not just, and I mean, this is going to feel silly. And you wouldn't hesitate to say this, because actually people get really mad when I say this, but when man children, actually do the hard thing, do the boring thing, make a sacrifice, do something difficult, grow up a little bit, and you got to really reinforce that. You got to really praise that. I know. I've been there too, where hearing that, I'm like, are you serious? Like, I'm going to have to praise my husband for like taking out the trash when I'm doing everything else. Like, he should just do that. Like, what? Why do I have to take on the emotional labor of like being like, yay, you did the really basic adulting. You did taxes. You're like, whatever. I get that. Like, it kind of feels patronizing, but if you can genuinely reinforce and say, hey, listen, I know that was hard for you. I know that wasn't pleasant. However, I really appreciate it, and it's going to really help keep the house clean. Right? Because if these man children, also, I forgot to say this earlier, but a lot of man children tend to have the diagnosis of ADHD and depression. So because they're like, oh, shiny, shiny, shiny. But when you have them actually follow through on something that's hard and unpleasant and doesn't feel good, then they don't have the same, they might not have the same, as we talked about, like, approach to that discomfort. We might say, oh, that feels good that I accomplished something, but they go, oh, that didn't feel good. That must mean it's wrong. So you have to add in the positive. You have to kind of give them a little like, you know what, that sucked. That probably was really boring or really gross or really annoying or below you, beneath you. But, I'm proud of you. You really did something hard, and now here's the benefit from it. I'm excited. That's really hard to do for what I just said. Like, it feels kind of patronizing. It feels like, why should I thank someone for just doing basic adulting? But what I see is the mistake that a lot of like partners or loved ones make with these man children is that they're so resentful, and the resentment builds over time, that even when the man children try and do the hard thing, they're like, okay, fine, I'll get a job, I'll take out the trash, I'll, like, kind of put up with, like, go to couples therapy and work through these issues that we're having. Then the loved ones, like the partners, are understandably so burnt out and resentful that even when they're trying to do the good thing, the partner's just like, you should have been doing that anyway. Right? So it's like punishing. There's really no good thing that they're getting out of it. They don't feel that accomplished. They're like, this sucks. And also, my wife or my parents like don't even care. So I'm just going to go back to, scrolling on TikTok and doing drugs. Right? So if you really want to encourage a man child to like grow up a little bit, you're going to have to take a step back, stop rescuing them. You have to set very clear boundaries and rules. And you're going to have to reinforce when they are, you know, do the adulting, do the hard adulting. Also, you could step back and say, I'm not taking this on, right? This is not my job to raise a man child. Um, it's harder when you're actually the mother, um, but that's another thing. It's like, it's not our responsibility. Their external blame on the world makes it seem like is everyone else's responsibility, but you could just say, no, it's not my job to make you grow up. So thank you so much for listening. I find this topic fascinating, and I mean, I hope I gave a well-rounded, complex and nuanced view of this, because I don't always think that this is a sign that they're bad people. Might do bad things in service of staying Peter Pan, the puer aeternus, but I think a lot of it is upbringing, and a lot of it is how people understand discomfort, pain, of reality. And hey, man, we could all understand that it is hard to grow up, but the people who do, the people who are able to be like, all right, I'm gonna have to sacrifice, they're the ones who get the good things, right? These man children have to bounce around from, you know, flower to flower to try to be coddled and try to get, propped up in this. But the people who are able to suffer through hardship and really work to get what they want in life, they develop deeper relationships. They're the ones who develop a good career. Like, the man children might get a flash in the pan. They might get, like a boost, like they might get one big success, but then to sustain that over time, to build a career, a company, a family, anything, a legacy, that takes pain and hard work. So if you're able to do that, then you will win in the end. And the men children are going to always be trapped chasing their youth. Thank you so much for listening. I love hearing your comments. You could always, on Spotify, I didn't realize that you could actually write comments. So if you're listening to this on Spotify, please write some comments, questions, and I'll respond. That's the easiest way to contact. But if you also want to reach out and learn more about any of this, I love talking to you guys. So Kibby at coolamind.com, Kibby at KULAMIND.com. Just email me. I love hearing from you. I love hearing your questions. I love hearing your stories. I love hearing requests for topics to cover. So I want to hear from you guys, little helpers. I love you all. And if you enjoyed this, please send this to a friend or give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or check this out on YouTube. You can actually see me on YouTube. So see you next week. By accessing this podcast, you acknowledge that the host of this podcast makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information purposes only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial, informational purposes only, and do not constitute the practice of any medical or any professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The host does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast. And information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Thank you.